Okay.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for liberal and open minds. Because yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, every single week we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. Well, right the way across the globe today, we're seeing a plethora of people, refugees or immigrants, enter into new markets. As people of Indian origin, we often see that in the most weirdest and wonderful, strangest places on the planet. And after 65 countries that I personally visited, I can't see any nation that doesn't have people that resemble us. However, amongst this movement of people, we are often seeing another shift in the way that the identities of nations are being questioned. Recently, I stumbled across an article about what's currently taking place in Greece, the rise of the far right, and how immigrants and refugees are being treated there. So I reached out across my contacts and I come across an incredible human being called Petros. I'm invited on the show to kind of give me a deep, brief interview of what it's currently like to be in Greece, what the Greek identity is, and the big discussion that we all need to know more about. So before I do, I'd like to welcome Petros to the show. Petros, it's lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much for your warm welcoming. I'm happy to be with you and ready to ask your questions. I am councillor in Athens municipality.
Yeah.
I'm also coordinator of KEEFRA. That stands for Movement United Against Racism and Fascist Threat. This campaign going for a lot of years in Greece because except of the nice picture that a lot of people have outside Greece, the tourist side of Greece, the islands, Parthenon, there's another side.
Yeah.
This is the workers' side of Greece, and migrants and refugees are now more than 10% of this country, represent a big proportion. So for us, their lives matter also, and not only the lives of the locals. So
that's interesting because I think first and foremost, as we start this, we all recognize that we're going beyond the arbitrary factor of skin color and of religion. We're saying, okay, this is a human story, the human civilization that is widespread across the planet. And it's people that are leaving, in most cases, some really horrific circumstances to take a voyage across seas, risking life and limb to enter into a new country. Now, obviously, there's an argument to be made that a lot of these people could be economic citizens, but that's reserved for another time. But before we kick off, Petros, what does it mean to be Greek for you? What is that identity on your side?
First of all, my origin is from Cyprus.
Cyprus, okay.
I have a double identity. I'm a refugee in this country after the war between Greece and Turkey in 1974. This is the war that partitioned the island between north and south.
Yeah.
So it's a complex story when you speak about Greece and the identity of the Greeks. A lot of times this identity is determined in a negative way, especially around the neighbors of Turkey and so on. But most of all, living in this country means that there's a history of struggle. There is a history of struggle for civil liberties, for liberation. And this is what I want to share with people, that immigrants and refugees are also part of this story. For us, there is a big debate in Greece, which goes that who is Greek? And there is a right wing and a far right approach that says it's a matter of blood. It's a matter of who are your ancestors.
Yeah.
And there was a big debate about citizenship. Who can take the citizenship? Children who are born in this country. This debate was a huge debate 10 years before. It ended in a very strange way that officially, in 2010, the migrants they could vote in municipal elections, one part of them. After 3 years, the highest court of the country canceled that right, because they said that to be Greek, it's something superb than to be a migrant who lives even 30 years in this country. Even if you born your children cannot be Greeks automatically. There are laws that making you waiting in the queue for a lot of years, for 18 years for the children, and for much more years for all the others. So the Greek identity has a burden of nationalism, I would say, that a lot of us in the movement of resistance, we don't accept that. We prefer that this is a place for multicultural identities. Different identities can coexist. What unites people is that they are normal, working people, the majority, not all the Greeks. Because, you know, there are very known Greeks who are owning the vessels, the ships, the tankers.
Yeah.
These are the people who don't obey to any rules. You know, the Greek owners of the ships, they were breaking the apartheid.
Yeah.
South Africa, they're breaking the measures of European Union for Iran. Now they say, we will carry the Russian oil, and they don't care. So in Greece, there are different terms for the same Greek identity.
So then you've got a flag of Greece where everyone almost swears allegiance to, but to define what it means to be Greek seems to be as difficult as waving towards the Parthenons, because you got so many different fractures towards that. So then you're an immigrant, for example, and this is a big question around the world. How far back does your ancestry have to be to determine in the national state that you belong to that country? Like, are we talking about 1 generation, 2 generations? What was defined by them, or was it just left open-handed?
Come on, this is not acceptable. It's outside of the logic to check the past of people to say, are they real Greeks?
Yeah.
If you go to 1821, which is the year of the Greek Revolution, the Greek National Independence Revolution, Greece was part of the Ottoman Empire, okay?
Yeah.
So this revolution had friends from different parts of Europe and so on. Most of them ended taking some part of Parthenon and bringing back to their countries, not only the British, but also the Germans, the French, and so on. But in that period, when we were speaking about the Greeks,
Yeah.
the Greeks could speak Albanian. They could speak a lot of different languages. I mean, the Balkans, after all, it's the term for different cultures.
So
different...
it was never Greek as in Greeks from Greece, that it's more of a philosophy that the Greeks held about unity, about making sure that you understand your neighbors, that you can actually communicate, that you can live on this planet rather than living within borders. So then now we come to the present day. Obviously, there's a lot of misconceptions that you said right at the start. When one thing's about Greece, it's the big adverts of sea, sand, great food, music, dishes being broken, and everything else along those lines. But the other side is that you see some really horrid footage. The far right beating people up in the streets. You see people on refugee boats not being able to enter in. You see the government changing policies. Now, what do you think is the biggest misconception that the local Greeks have about refugees and that the world has towards Greece?
I would say that the locals are not hostile to the refugees and to the migrants. What happens really is that the governments are hostile to the refugees. They're using Islamophobia. They're using racism as a tool to...
Is it to garner votes? Do you think it's just to keep themselves in power? It's a lot easier to blame somebody else to keep yourself in power than anything else.
I would say it's a lot of things happening on the same time. I mean, Islamophobia was the main instrument for Western governments to make an excuse why they participate in the bombing of Afghanistan and Iraq. Greece was part of this. Greece is part of NATO. Greece has military bases. The aircrafts who are bombing Afghanistan, they were helped by the military bases of Crete. I mean, now Greece it's a main place for US military bases. So Islamophobia and racism is one way to supporting your local population, why we should participate in NATO and in the wars, so the refugees are not welcome. I mean, on this scale, so Muslim origin of refugees is becoming a problem. And look, we're in Greece, where there is a Muslim minority, okay, at the north of Greece, Turkish Muslim minority. But you have now the Greek government arguing that the refugees who want to enter Greece from, especially from the islands and from Evros River, which is the natural border with Turkey, they are invaders of Greece. This is a hybrid war, and the war behind the war is Erdogan, the Turkish president, because you know Greek nationalism has the enemy. So they say that the refugees are an instrument, and on this racist theory, racist nationalist theory, they are building a fence on Evros. They declare a war in 2020. They sent the army. They closed the border. They were killing refugees there on the border. And even the last month, one child with the name Maria, she was bitten by a scorpion, and she was in a very small island in the river, an island produced actually when the water goes down only in the summer. And both governments, they were arguing that it's not their soil. Erdogan said it's a Greek soil, so the refugees are in your country. And the Greek prime minister said, no, it's in your. And the child died there. The child died. 38 refugees for 1 month. Even the European Court ordered Greece to rescue the refugees, and they were denied for 10 days. So this is the picture of what is the life of refugees now. And this is not only on the border, okay? In the center of Athens, almost 2 kilometers from where all the tourists are going around, from Syntagma Square and Acropolis, there is a camp for refugees. I would say with more, it was more human than other camps, but it was also in Athens. The people, they could get inside and outside without police control. Their children were in the school, they were working. Athens municipality decided to close down this camp and to transfer all these people in other camps, 400 kilometers, 200 kilometers outside the city, which is, I mean, it's dislocating the refugees because you don't want refugees in the city. This is, I mean, it's open racism, okay, to dislocate. The children, they were losing their schools, their friends. They cannot access to hospitals. So there are big issues in this country concerning the rights of migrants, but also it's the migrants who are working. They, I mean, in the last 2 or 3 months, we had 4 racist attacks by employers denying to pay. I mean, the tourists are going to different beautiful islands and they are served souvlaki, tzatziki. If you go in the kitchen, you will see black people, you will see African, Bangladesh, and so on. A lot of times they end being beaten. And one of the biggest stories in Greece, if you go 10 years before, it was what happened with the migrant workers in the strawberry fields of Manolada. The workers, they went to the boss and say, okay, pay our salary. He said, no. They went again. after 10 days, when they went, a lot of them, almost like a demonstration, they shoot them. So 28 of them, they had on their bodies bullets for, for birds, not
Yeah.
So blood everywhere. They were screaming. It was very good that this didn't end just in a massacre and silence, but it became the biggest workers' revolt, migrant workers' revolt in this country. Thousands, they responded. I mean, we went there and we organized as a movement, a local strike, 10 days strike, mass mobilization. All migrant workers, they participated, and they ended the terror of the bosses, because
I
this
was
was
gonna,
for 5 years.
I was gonna say, why does this bother you? Obviously, you're a refugee, as you rightly said, in Greece, but to commit your life towards fighting for other people's freedom is quite a large task for anybody. And obviously, you paid certain consequences for that. But why do you bother with it, Petros?
We are for human liberation. We are for workers' rights. And if we don't work alongside migrant workers, we will lose all of us. I mean, the bosses, they want to split the workers between locals and migrants in order to put down the salaries, the wages. When we organize the migrant workers in the unions, all the workers are getting paid better. So it's the immediate life, but also it's a vision that of society that we have. We want all these people to have their rights, and we cannot sleep just like that when we know that on the neighborhood there are fascists and neo-Nazis like the Golden Dawn who are stamping the migrants. That's why for the last 10 years, when we had the far right and the neo-Nazis of Golden Dawn who went in the parliament, we stood everywhere against them. They were murdering. They murdered Shahzad Lukman, a Pakistani worker. They murdered Pavlos Fissas, a musician. But they were trying to control the neighborhoods with groups of fascists everywhere. The unity between the Greek workers' movement and the migrants was very crucial to stop fascism and to bring down the racist attacks.
Well, what do you think causes fascism in a place like Greece? Because just recently we've seen what's happening in Sweden. You know, the government's now changed. You've got a far right group that's coming in. We've seen this, like, the same thing happening in countries like Italy. Some may argue it's happening right the way across South Asia as well. So obviously it goes beyond just the arbitrary factor of skin color. It's no longer about this. It's something deeper ingrained. In your opinion, you've obviously been doing this for decades. Is it just a normal human revelation that we want to have some form of exclusivity? Or are we just simply pawns for governments? Because ultimately it is great political currency, isn't it? Because now you've got a voting pool of public that can say, hey, I'm standing up for your rights by attacking those guys who are trying to take your rights. And, you know, in a world where virtue signaling is at its heightest, this is probably the best gold rush that any politician can have. But what's it in your mind? What's causing this?
I think it's we're in a period of crisis of the system generally of capitalism, which is has a lot of phases. This crisis, it's political crisis, it's economic crisis, it's competition that leads to war, it's climate crisis, and so on. And neoliberalism has collapsed. I mean, the market and the ability of the system to adapt does not exist. We lost millions in the pandemic. I mean, in the last month, what happened in Pakistan with the floods, 33 million people, they lost their houses. We have now millions of refugees in the war in Ukraine, adding to millions of refugees in other wars. So when you go to Western neoliberal republics and you discover that these countries, they are part of the problem. They're participating in imperialist war. They are part of the problem of who is destroying the climate. Now it's making worse all these things. Then you have the crisis of the political system, the collapse of the traditional political parties, both of neoliberals and social democrats. And the far right is rising because the far right is saying very simply, the neoliberals and all the others, when they say that there is problem with migrants, they don't have a solution. The solution is what we say: keep them out, kill them. I mean, this is a very practical way that how the political crisis and the neoliberal governments, how they're ending, adapting to the agenda of the far right by adopting Islamophobia, by adopting the measurements to close the border. I mean, when we speak about the United Kingdom, they are speaking now about deporting people to Rwanda, which is, come on, even the fascists, they don't dare to do that.
But do you know what? What was strange about that is because many people won't know the Rwanda deal, the initial payment given by the British taxpayers was 120 million that was pumped into the Rwandan government to give a trial for this. Now, everyone's talking about the refugees that are going over, the supposed refugees, but no one's saying, actually, where did that money come from and what has been spent on? So we've all been ultimately pawns because everyone's looking at the content, but they're not actually looking at the context of the situation, that this cycle of money that could be utilized towards actually making the world a better place by helping uplift those who are in severe poverty in the UK has almost been squandered over. And we're not going to talk obviously about the Nightingale Hospital because that's a totally different thing. But that's the question that we're all not answering or even questioning. A lot of these governments out there, those in power that are utilizing the division of color or the division of ethnicity are also squandering billions of pounds or billions of euros every single year, but nobody questions a thing. And when the system starts to collapse, it's very easy to blame those who have just recently come in rather than actually pointing fingers at the policies that enable these guys to execute what they're doing.
It's they are scapegoating migrants and refugees in order to divert the anger of the people when they realize that the government policy is the problem. I mean, people, they don't have now energy in their houses, and the excuse that we have to win the war with Russia. Who started this fucking war?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Who started this war? Why? If we put the big why there is this competition between the West and Russia, the West and China, and what are the rights of the immense majority of the people? They are speaking about climate change, and what's happening with this war is the biggest crime.
Absolutely. Because we're spending, even if we, maybe it's just the case that we just virtue signal as countries, isn't it? Because we're saying we need to stop climate change, yet we're utilizing more weaponry than ever before in our civilization. That creates carbon as well. We're digging up more resources than ever to kill one another. That creates war as well. So then what's your solution then? Because obviously there's a lot of problems out there. And I know it's a very difficult question to ask you because ultimately that is going to be the multi-trillion-dollar answer to the global woes. But what would be your immediate solutions? What do you see happening? Because there's always going to be competition for jobs. And that's one of the biggest things. We've seen it happening in Poland right now. The Ukrainian refugees came in. At the beginning, everyone had open arms. Now people are re-questioning, saying, well, hang on, we can't get a job. And I'm local. I got kids that need to go to school. They can't even get a place in. Yet a refugee has just come in who hasn't paid any taxes is getting my place. And it's not more of a xenophobia thought process, but it's more of self-preservation. What do you do? How do you make a more fair, equitable society then?
I think that the unity of the world working class is the only solution. We have to stop the system. And the heart of the system is the drive for profit. Yeah. Profit creates competition. Profit creates oppression of the workers of all nations. The war creates refugees. The profit creates climate catastrophe. So if we don't stop the capitalist machine, we are doomed. And the solution to stop this machine is workers' unity. What happened in Sri Lanka? What happened in Beirut? I enjoyed watching young workers swimming in the pools of the rich there. Okay, I mean, there is no other solution other from revolution, I would say. So we have to think about alternatives, how we can stop the climate change if we don't control the bosses of the oil industry, the lobby for the car, and all this complex which is around there. And this complex, it's the heart of driving the humanity in the wars. So for us, the people who are working in these industries, they bear the biggest responsibility and chance to change the world. It's very important that in this period of stagflation, the rise in prices, that we have strikes in the United Kingdom, in Germany, in Greece. The workers are, they don't accept the sacrifices for the war in Ukraine. We have to be very clear on that. People that are opposing this.
Yeah.
I mean, the media, they are making everything to say, oh, we are for that. And people, they say neither NATO, neither Putin, this is the immense majority in Greece. And people, they have solutions. We have a tradition of a big united international struggle. What happened with the World Trade Organization and the Seattle movement in 1999, the anti-globalization movement, the World Social Forum, the huge anti-war movement for the war in Iraq in 2003. I think the climate change movement that says that the system is the problem. There are a lot of big movements who are opposing this system, and there is hope there.
What's your biggest fear?
Sorry?
What's your biggest fear? What's
Woody?
what's your biggest fear? What's the thing that scares you the most?
Fear. I think it's competition and wars. I mean, the prospect of an escalation of the war, which can include nuclear weapons, this is a real threat for humanity. And we have to rush to stop this war. And if we have the next step of this competition, which is China versus United States in Taiwan, I think this is really threatening for all of us. We have to move quickly in country by country to oppose the war, to oppose all this drive for profit. If we don't do it, we're really doomed.
Because I suppose there is a new way to look at how business structures are. As you absolutely said, well, I think there's a great saying, once we chop down the last tree, we'll realize what it means to eat, because you can't eat money. And that's where we're heading towards as a society. And you see it all over the world. I just came back from Uganda a while ago, and you start realizing, well, with this great oil wealth, there also comes another side towards us. And are we prepared to deal with that elephant in the room? How much does one individual need in order to be content? And on the other side is that we are a human race. We are a species. We're one of a trillion species on the back of this planet. And we must be the most absurd species to think that we can collectively put a border, an imaginary border on a planet to stop people from going back and forth, when that's been part of our evolution for centuries. That's the reason why we are the way that we are. Like coming back to Greece, like what is your message to the international community? Because obviously people are listening to the podcast from right the way across the globe as we speak. And many people, again, all they think about when it comes to Greece is sun, sea, Parthenons. And yet you have Greece going out there effectively trying to attract FDI, foreign direct investment, getting big businesses to come in and invest in because it's cheap labor and sun and everything else along that line. But the bottom question for a lot of investors saying, well, if ethics means something to you, if your social corporate responsibility means something to you more than a buzzword, then well, shouldn't you be reconsidering Greece as an investment destination? If they don't treat their own people well, or the rights of migrants well, shouldn't you be diverting that? And even for the tourism population. But then here comes the other problem, Petros. I feel like I'm psychoanalyzing myself, because the moment you go down that line, that means you don't get people coming in. People do not get jobs. People do not get paid. And therefore, they can't feed themselves and they can't live anywhere. Like, well, how do you work this out? What do you do?
I don't think that the future for the working class in Greece is tourism, it's investment, and so on. Because always this system with the investments, it comes to a point where there is a collapse and people are losing their jobs. This is the history of capitalism, of the system. To change this means really to give a different alternative. With the technology and the riches of civilization, people could do their living by working 3 or 4 hours. But now they're working almost 12 and 16 hours in order to take two salaries. Why? Because, you know, tourism is changing the value of land. I'll give you an example of what's happening in the neighborhood of Athens now. The rents are going up and people are dislocated. There is a process, a huge process of gentrification when we have this process of tourism invading every place of Athens. So there is opposition to this. I mean, there are people who are responding, but also there are the workers in tourist industry. Tomorrow there is a strike in the hotels all around because they are demanding their salary increase in pay. So, I mean, people, they are continuously in this process of investment, the same tourism, and Greece is attracting now a lot of tourists. It doesn't mean that social inequality, it goes back. I mean, the bosses are becoming richer and the workers are becoming more poor. So it's not automatic that investment means that, we are here.
So that is essentially like a government's tagline. Okay, great investment with great jobs, therefore the economy is better. But the reality is you're saying, well, yeah, we get the investment in, but those companies, most of the time, they're offshore anyway. But the salary for those people become even lower and lower and lower, and they're priced out from the places that they live in. And all that happens then is that you create a system that is just totally unequal. You know, when you look across the globe, and I'm sure you would have done this, is there any country that you benchmark that you say, actually, that country there has got a system that works?
No, I'm sorry.
Is there any country that you think is close to getting some sort of a solution or some sort of an answer?
No, I wouldn't say that, because all the countries and their states are part of this world capitalist system. I mean, they may have different political systems and so on. Some political systems are really nasty. You have to oppose them. Okay, very, very clearly and very openly. But even the most liberal and the most determining themselves democratic and open, I mean, go to the United States of America. You have to fight through the Black Lives Matter movement, through Me Too movement. You have to oppose the highest court of the country that is trying to make illegal abortion, where in the United States. So, I mean, it's everywhere. This drive for profit by a small minority of 1% is creating.
Well, what does it mean to be human to you, Petros? Because obviously you got this very humanistic view, the way that you look at the world, and you know, it's very evident the way that you speak, the way that you articulate certain phrases. So therefore, the human experience to you means a particular thought system. What is it?
I mean, first of all, it's solidarity with the exploited and the oppressed people. I mean, this is the center of humanism, because even humanists cannot be abstract. I mean, I'm listening to a lot of philanthropists. Yeah. Also, the NGOs are going around to save humanity and so on.
But they're doing it almost in a capitalistic way. So they're part of the, I hear you.
They're enterprises, come on. I mean, they're enterprises. And the biggest philanthropists are the capitalists themselves. Yeah. You have to go to George Soros himself. He's a philanthropist, okay. But he's
the man who broke the bank, absolutely.
Part of the system. And for me, I mean, simple workers, the people who are working in the factory, in the peasant, they represent I mean, for these people, it's what we are fighting for, because this is the possibility to change society. It's their consciousness, it's their collective struggle that can change the world.
So for you, it's really that collectivism is about people coming together, is almost united like the skin on the back of your hand. Each cell needs each other in order to create something bigger. And that's what you're saying, actually, as human beings, if we can come together, we can provide an equality of experience. And that's what matters. It's not about the big house or the big car. It's about actually those human relationships. And can we learn a lot from each other? So therefore, in this fickleness of being alive for whatever years it is, now at least we know that it was something that everybody benefited from. It sounds like a radical shift, but really it's a very common sense viewpoint, isn't it? Like, obviously, there's no country in the world that has got it right. In your opinion as well, there's no country that is getting it right or even getting close to it. So are we ultimately doomed? Are you fighting a losing battle?
No, I'm optimistic that, okay, I'm also politically in a small minority of revolutionary socialists.
Yeah.
The reason why we are so optimistic is that things that this political current was supporting for a lot of years, now they're in the minds of millions of people around the world. I mean, we couldn't even imagine to watch people in Sri Lanka in the swimming pool of the presidential
Palace.
Okay, so I mean, revolutions are coming back, not because the revolutionaries are millions in the majority, but because the system is in crisis and the working classes arising their consciousness. I mean, there are so many experiences that they went through. I mean, the experience of racism, of war, of austerity were increased, 10 years of austerity.
Yeah.
But we remember that there was resistance. In Greece, we had 35 general strikes. I mean, all these things means that the people are
people are feeling frustrated, aren't they? I think people are starting for the first time in our collective history looking at each other, and they're saying, okay, well, what can we do unitedly towards it? Because if you look across the globe, it really is a two-tier system. I know we did a podcast recently on the Commonwealth, and the whole argument was saying, well, is a Commonwealth, there's loads of people who are common and loads of people that are wealthy, and the whole thing lacks common sense. And I think that's what's essentially happening now, that people are saying enough is enough. Are we living lives? And that's the question that everybody has to answer. What is your human experience on this planet? Because if it's the case that you are working constantly, spending less time with the family, well, that's going to create a decay in society anyway. But the next part is, as a business owner, if you truly believe in ethics, if you truly believe in the morality and you're not virtue signaling or having selective moral outrage, well, surely you're going to be defining your business success on more than a parameter of profit. It's going to be based upon how much am I giving back towards the planet? What am I doing to create a better world for everybody? What am I doing to create a better evolution of experiences? And that's what you're discussing, saying actually, as people who believe in the socialist value, is about society first, about the collective. Because if that's taken care of, businesses then will do well. Because collectively, you have economies of scale. If that doesn't work, businesses are doomed to fail. You may make short-term profit, but you're going to have long-term disproportions because you're not going to have a bloody planet left. You know, so what's the point of living in a mansion if you can't eat anything?
Yes, but the problem here, there's a big but on that.
Yeah.
I mean, for simple workers who are just working, okay, it doesn't cost them to make big changes. For someone who is a businessman, he has to fight and to have enough profit to survive.
Yeah.
His company, if the company cannot survive in the competition with other companies, he's doomed.
Down. Yeah.
So that's a big difference. I mean, for the collective workers, when they decide to fight and to resist and to ask for more salaries in this period, this is their life. For the boss, it's not his life or her life. Is that he will lose the profit that it is necessary for him to survive in the competition. So there are different motives.
But it also means that for that business, it's that if they were to go under because they're no longer becoming profitable, all those jobs would be lost. And it's so weird, isn't it? Because that fine line, what do you do? How do you balance it through? But I suppose coming back into the mindset of Greece and looking at that side, you know, Greece is on this impetus. And I suppose, isn't that that stage right now. There's laws that are passed through that affected a lot of the Bangladeshi workers, obviously, who have come over in huge swathes. And there was a deal done between the Greek government and the Bangladesh government to enable these workers to be there for a bit longer. That law has been passed and is having a tremendous impact on those individuals in a negative way. Is that opening up the functionality for more aggressive policies to come through in the future? Because that's the biggest issue that everyone's facing. If you're allowing this to come through as a piece of legal legislation, what's next in the artillery?
I think that this is a step back for the legalization of migrants. I mean, in this country from the 90s, as part of the working movement and the anti-racist movement, we organized a lot of campaigns for the legalization of all migrants.
Yeah.
We didn't care about how many years. We say, give them papers, give them the right to work, to have a house, their children to go to the school. The last 10 years, and this connected with the European Union, their policy of making a European pact for asylum and migration that was really terrible. That pact, for the first time, put limits, both on asylum rights, but also on the economic, I would say, migrants. So in Greece, the last law for legalization goes back to 2007. 2007. We are now 15 years without a process of, I would say, mass legalization. Because it's obvious that there are 200,000 migrants who are working for a lot of years, who are paying taxes. You can see them in the queue paying their taxes, but they don't have paper. You can see them working in the villages on the orange trees, on the strawberries, and so on. But they have a very silly paper that says the police is postponing your deportation. That's the paper. I mean, there are people who are living with really a paper like that would say, that says the police is postponing your deportation. I mean, it's really a shame. And this agreement between Greece and Bangladesh, and it's going the same with Pakistan, it's really to put these workers under the control of some companies who have the base in Bangladesh and Pakistan. They will control who will come here. We know that in order to happen this, they will pay the ambassador, they will pay that company in order to give them a job in Greece. And this boss who will say, I want someone to come from India, from Bangladesh or Pakistan. Okay, he will have this worker for 9 months, and then 3 months. Of course, he will be his worker, but without
rights.
Security.
And so essentially what we're seeing is, in a world where we talk about slave labor, this will be almost a new version of indentureship, because therefore people are coming in, they will be treated dismally, that we've seen already reports of. I suppose what your bigger issue is, Petros, is that you're saying, well, governments are acting like corporations now. All of a sudden, these are commodities as people. We're not just voters that vote people in, but willingly we put ourselves as lambs to the slaughterhouse, because by voting them in, they're also voting us out, and they're pushing into different countries. Petros, I wish I could talk to you for so much longer, but I'm going to have to wrap up the show on my side. But I have a feeling that this is the first of many discussions to come. If people want to find out more about your work, where do they go to?
There is a website, www.antiracistfascist.org. Most of it is in Greek, but there are some English their writings, because a lot of times we are producing in different languages, even in Bangla, Urdu, Farsi, Arabic. There are some, because our friends who are members of this movement, they are helping also.
They're helping. Done. Petros, thank you very much for coming on.